was the work Christmas do last night, so.
Oh, that's why you were late.
Yeah. I know, feeling a little dusty this morning.
Well, I really enjoyed the film. I watched it just a couple of days ago. And yeah, I mean, I just good old horrors set in one big house. I know it sounds like a bit of a niche, but it's my kind of thing. But I'm going to begin by asking what it was initially attracted both of you to this project. So I'll start with you, Nick.
They just offered me loads of money.
Yeah.
Turn it down. Well, I've met Yoni, one of the producers, and I guess he didn't write the screenplay, but he created the story alongside Hank. We'd met a few years back and got on really well, and then when the script came through, actually it was the original script was quite different. There was this whole other section outside, them traveling to New York and everything, and Art was far more of an arsehole in that version, and that's always fun. So that was the initial thing. He was a really kind of smarmy, untrustworthy, duplicitous guy. That shifted quite a bit because I think they wanted to make him, well, he had to be more likable really to carry the story. And then it was a case of meeting. They set up a Zoom meeting with Oliver, and I'm not a horror fan, so I find it quite difficult to read those scripts, even because it's to put them into context. And when I met Oliver, the director, his enthusiasm and just that he had such a clear vision and confidence in himself and the story, that really made me want to do it. And we were kind of still in semi-lockdown, so chance to travel and whenever you enter onto a new project, meet a whole bunch of new people. And it's like with a lot of things, it's the people that attract you, and meeting the producers, meeting the director, that made me kind of jump in.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously it's a film with many layers that's kind of slowly unraveled throughout, but there's so much to this. Do you remember first reading the script and your reaction?
Yes, I do. I mean, similar with Nick. It was when I first read it and thought, this is something that I could be attached to. It seemed like a challenge. I haven't done anything, in the horror realm before, or thriller sort of sense. And so even just from an acting standpoint, it seemed like it was something I could really sink my teeth into. But I do remember when I first read the script that I was really, especially for a horror, I was really blown away by just the depth and richness of it, and I hadn't seen something that was based on like a Hasidic Jewish family, and that was kind of driven by so much culture, and that kind of drew me to it from the beginning. And then Claire kind of being this outsider, I felt like I could sort of relate to in many ways, and so I was kind of excited to explore that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. And Nick, you said you weren't a big fan of the horror genre before this. Has this changed anything in that regard?
No, nothing at all.
Yeah.
No, I'm really squeamish, so I'm not into gore or anything. I'm not very good at getting scared and jumps and all that. And the advantage of being able to watch this is that I kind of know what's going to happen. I know it's all fake because I was there when it was shot, so it makes it a lot easier to watch. But I won't be rushing to the cinema to see a horror film anytime soon.
Yeah, I have to say I'm the same.
Because I mean, like being in a horror movie, or just being an actor kind of in general, has it impacted your enjoyment of the genre? Because more so than any other genre, it requires such a suspension of disbelief. But you, as an actor, know the mechanics of a film. You know how things work. You know how scares can be sort of manufactured. Does it make it harder for you as an audience member sometimes to watch films in that way?
I find myself, well, you know what? A lot of the time it depends on the quality of the film.
I was going to say, if it's a good film, if you walk out of that and you're like, I didn't think about that once, you know that they've done something really right there. But sorry, keep going, Nick.
Yeah, well, no, I concur. When there's a bit too much time for you to think, I find myself picking apart the story and seeing where the act breaks are, and where the conflict arises, and start seeing the structure of the film, and then the tricks, and so on. And sometimes it depends why you're watching a film. Sometimes I watch a film for those reasons, to kind of pick it apart. But yeah, a a not very good film, you start to see the mechanics of it quite quickly, and often they're not great mechanics, which is why the film doesn't work.
Yeah. It's funny because I like horror movies, but I'm not into like gory horror. I like sort of psychological, which I think
I'm the same.
Yeah, but this, I mean, what do you think it is? Because I mean, this film is many things. It's centered about grief, loss, family. Why do you think the horror genre works as such a vehicle for such human themes, despite often veering into the supernatural?
Do you know what? I wish Ollie was here. He'd be able to answer that question.
I was going to say, like, I think, you know, it's similar to sort of like fantasy or sci-fi. It's like a vehicle into those topics and sometimes some difficult themes and subject matter that makes it accessible in a way that you're kind of slightly removed from it, and you can still kind of explore those ideas in that way. And also, I think people just like feeling alive, and horror does that really well. You know, like you're sweaty and your heart's pounding, and you're walking out of a cinema and you're exhilarated. And I think that's what people really love about this specific genre. That to me is terrifying, and I couldn't think of anything less than having like that anxiety riddled through my body. But I can understand it from that standpoint.
It immediately raises the stakes as well. If you say in sci-fi, you're talking about worlds colliding, for example, or you know, in horror, the demon in the basement, it just raises the stakes, so it allows you to draw in an audience and give them all that excitement, and then tell your story that may be about family in this case. And actually doing this gives me a far greater appreciation of the genre as well. You see all the work that goes into it, and you know, some of the traditions and tropes that you know are going to get reinvented as people make films. It really gave me an appreciation of it.
But how is it when you sort of step foot into a horror, you have to then access fear as an emotion as an actor? How is it portraying that? Because I don't act. I'd be absolutely rubbish if I even tried to act. But I always imagine acting scared would be one of the hardest things to perform. How did you find fear on screen?
Yeah, you know, it's so funny. I remember reading this script, and because I'm such a scaredy cat in horror, you know, like we were talking about, I can't watch it. I thought it was going to be relatively easy. I was like, yeah, I'll just be terrified the whole time. But then I kind of forgot about it's so technical. You know, the stakes are so high and it's extremely technical. And, you know, rather than, especially for my scenes, a lot of them are just me and this imaginary monster or a deity. And really it was just Lorenzo on the other side of the camera being like, you know, good, that's good work. So, you know, trying to cultivate that fear and finding ways to kind of get there was a really interesting exercise. I used a lot of music and a lot of like psychological gesture that kind of would trigger my body to register the fear and things like that. So it was just interesting to try and figure it out. But Nick and I have talked about this before. Even though you consciously know that you're safe and you know everything is okay, your body doesn't know the difference, and so it would often take me a long time to recover from some of those scenes, and even well after the film as well.
Yeah, and Nick, I wanted to ask, because I mean you share quite a few scenes with Paul Kaye, and I mean I've always liked Paul Kaye ever since the Dennis Pennis days. He seems like a real character. What was he like to collaborate with on set? Because he always strikes me as someone that obviously works really hard, but would be quite a laugh on set as well.
Oh, he's a great laugh. He's got brilliant stories as well. Some of the best stories of all his the mayhem that he caused in the 90s. And I'm the same as you, massive Dennis Pennis fan. And I said to when I was trying to explain who Paul was in our cultural history in the UK, or his cultural significance, I said to her, well, if you wouldn't have Sacha Baron Cohen if you hadn't had Dennis Pennis. And funny enough, when I said that to Paul, and he goes, well, I've got a story for you actually, and he goes into this story about how when he got asked to do Dennis Pennis, it was almost pre-viral, where he just did it drunk with his mates. He'd do this hybrid of Woody Allen and John Lydon, go out on the streets and just mess with people. And this VHS video ended up on the desk of a Channel 4 commissioner, an editor or someone at Channel 4, who tracked him down. He gets his phone call and asks, would you be up for doing a TV show? And Paul, being the kind of punk he is, he was a lead singer in a punk band. He just went, yeah, all right. And then thought, how the hell am I going to write a TV show? So he called up his mate, who he just thought was the funniest guy he knew. He was a mechanic or something like that, and said, would you be up for helping me? So this guy said, yeah, starts writing with Paul. And this guy, the mechanic, is Sacha Baron Cohen's producing partner and writing partner. And now not only has, his own little mechanics garage, has a fleet of cars and everything at his mansion in LA. So you'd get all those kind of stories with Paul. Loads of stories that I couldn't really repeat. In fact, I was telling, one about the pyramids, which is not for repeating. So just hanging out on set, it was great. We got on really well. We've hung out since, and great fun to work with, because he brings that energy to set and is up for playing around with things, and that I enjoy doing that, but it kind of needs to some degree be with the permission of everybody in the scene and everything. So to have somebody like that up for messing around and exploring it and pushing things is really great.
Had you seen much of Pennis? Have you seen any?
I haven't. No, I hadn't. My brother did. So my brother's he's like 11 years older than me, and he was like, you have to let me know what it's like working with Paul. Like, he knew all about it. So no, I kind of was introduced when I met him, but he was a lovely, lovely, generous man. It was lovely working with him.
And Nick, you were talking about kind of having fun on set. And obviously, you want to have fun in anything you're in, but because obviously when you're making kind of independent cinema or make sort of stuff like that, I wonder, how different is that to, let's say, when you're making something like Shield, and it's a kind of big Marvel production? I'm a huge production value, and I'm assuming there's sort of, with that comes kind of pressure and stuff like that. Do you find there can be differences in the way actors can kind of be on set, or do you reckon that energy and that kind of good nature is true throughout all projects, any budget, any distributor?
I think to some degree there's that sense of, I think actors get a bad rep because of one or two who are difficult and problematic, and take advantage of how fortunate we are to do what we do, and to live the lives that we live and so on. But generally people are just cool, and so I'd say that's fairly universal. But there are certainly differences between doing something that is such a big machine, because there's so many layers of approval. So if you're coming in and wanting to completely improvise a scene, it's probably not going to happen. But when you're doing more independent stuff, where there's less of those layers of approval, then it just gives you that freedom to explore a bit more, change things up. And often that could be the most rewarding thing, is that you help develop the character or the story, and have a input into scenes and ideas, because I always think two heads are better than one, and no one has a monopoly over good ideas, so why not everybody just throw them in and see what comes out from it. But then tonally you've got to think as well, because I think my way of keeping my energy up is to have a laugh and to mess around a bit and keep the energy going. But tonally, that depends on the day's shooting. There was times, particularly on this film, where that just wasn't really possible, because it was really heavy stuff some days. In regards to what Em said about bringing it home with you, there'd be days where you just feel exhausted because you're emotionally drained, because there's some really heavy going. It's not just the horror and the scares, which was far more probably Em's experience. Mine was a lot more about my relationship with my dad in it, and that could get really. My dad. I'm probably gonna. I lost my dad 10 years ago, so exploring a kind of separation from your father and seeing them after all this time, and that relationship breaking down again and so on, that it drew a lot on my personal experience, which was draining, and I certainly was going to be dicking around in those scenes.
Well, of course. I've just got one more quick question each before I finish up, because I was just going to ask you, because I think actors often say when they wear a costume for a role, it helps them feel like character. So if you're playing a 16th century king and suddenly you're in the appropriate attire, it helps transport you into the role at hand. In this case, of a kind of pregnancy costume, did it help you get into the head of the role and understand that kind of vulnerability, suddenly feel that sense of protection, I suppose, in some ways, that because I guess you had to lug that around all day.
Yeah, no, actually, it was so uncomfortable. It was really, really uncomfortable, and I was wearing that for like 14 hours a day. But I did do, a lot of my girlfriends were actually pregnant at the time, and so I really did talk to them about what that experience is like, because, you know, I haven't experienced it myself. Yeah, to answer your question, in that case, probably not.
And just then, very finally, Nick, before I go, because I know I just touched briefly before about your TV career. We all loved Andor. I mean, it was such a great series. Might we see you back for season 2?
Oh, I've no idea. I'm kind of almost wearing the uniform for it, though. I've got my green army green on. But yeah, that was a lot of fun to do. I've still not actually seen it yet. I've heard great things though. Everybody's been telling me how brilliant it is. And lots of friends who aren't necessarily Star Wars fans or, you know, in that genre think it's great. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
You've not seen it yet?
I've not seen it yet. No, you know, it's like there's so much stuff to watch. Get busy. I've not actually sat down to watch it. And also, I think the more, you know, the less inclined I am to watch things. I mean, sometimes you just go, oh, you can just leave it as it was. Don't want to overanalyze your performance too much. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. Just give it a go.
Yeah, I've heard great things.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck with the release of the movie.
Nice one. Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey You